Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 4, Episode 43. Hello and welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast with me, Mark Taylor. Today I'm joined by Ollie Tunmer, who's the director of Beat Goes On, which is a STOMP-style body percussion in samba workshop. And this is obviously very close to my heart as a professional musician and someone who delivers samba and percussion workshops in schools. So hopefully we'll have a lot in common and a lot to chat about. So, Ollie, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Absolute pleasure. Hello.
So give us a little bit of background about your percussion background and how the Beat Goes On got going and the sorts of things that it offers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yes, I am, as you are, kind of a drummer and percussionist first and foremost. Playing since, well, very, very young age. I was kind of playing pots and pans, and then my mum was like, stop hitting my crockery. So kind of got me a drum kit. And then, basically went through as kind of music services and drum kit lessons and that kind of thing, and went to Kingston Uni to do a music performance degree. And then from there, I met a guy called Sam Alexander, who's a bit of a kind of internationally renowned authority on Afro-Brazilian percussion. And it was his kind of route that kind of got me into the London samba scene initially, and then I went to Brazil and played in the carnival, which was amazing. And then a few years later, I got involved with STOMP as a performer and as a workshop facilitator. And then I was a classroom music teacher for a couple of years. And then in the past couple of years, set up Beat Goes On. And we're now, as you said, delivering STOMP-style body percussion and samba drumming workshops and CPD throughout the UK and internationally. So it's quite a nice life.
Fantastic. Give us a little bit of an insight into what it's like to be part of STOMP, because I would imagine lots of teachers and everyone listening will be just thinking that's quite a cool thing when you sort of see them on the telly. Or
it does help, yeah. And also in terms of when I say body percussion, sometimes I get some slightly confused faces. They're like, what, just like clapping and stuff? And it's like, well, yes, there is that. But obviously, if you mention STOMP, they have a kind of a slightly better idea of things that are going on. Although we do focus purely on the body percussion element. There's no brooms or bins or anything. I leave that to the guys that are still doing it.
Yeah.
But yes, doing the show was great fun. I did the London show and the European tour, which was awesome. And I think I loved doing the show. There is, however, as I'm sure lots of kind of performers, there are lots of waiting around, and I think that's kind of what got me. I'm not very good at just kind of going, I'm going to watch DVDs for another few hours. It's I like kind of being productive, which is kind of why I have the lifestyle I do now, where it's busyness is just a natural part of it. But doing the 2 hours of the show was incredible, and working with some phenomenal performers, and really kind of learning a lot in terms of kind of stagecraft and how to kind of deal with mistakes as such, and how you actually turn them into something that works rather than just going, oh no, I got that wrong. And so kind of the whole live performance angle, and also STOMP have a sister show called the Lost Found Orchestra, which I was very privileged to be part of, and we ended up going to the Sydney Opera House and breaking the box office records there. So all in all, phenomenal part of my kind of performing career, and obviously a huge amount of where I am now.
Yeah, and what I really like about that is what you said about the whole stagecraft thing, because I think the one thing that we often forget as teachers, and especially as a classroom teacher, is the fact that you have an audience every day that you're working with, and that you're encouraging, and you're trying to ignite that spark of interest in whatever it is that you're doing. And so I know a lot of people are slightly fearful about doing music in their classroom, but actually a lot of the skills that you need as a musician in order to deliver it, they actually already have, don't they?
Absolutely. And also I actively encourage teachers to, show off a bit. If they're, if they can show, but like the performance side of whatever it is they specialize in, kids will really, really respond to that. And there'll be sometimes if I'm kind of in a kind of perhaps an afternoon session and it's a bit of a hot day or whatever, and just to kind of wake kids up a bit, I'll just stop what we're doing and I'll just go into a body percussion solo, just for the sake of, right, this is what we can kind of get to. And it's a bit showy offy, but it's hopefully going to inspire them to go, oh, okay, I'll kind of get on the case with this, and we'll kind of wake things up a bit, and it'll, kind of give everybody a kick up the butt, basically.
Yeah, and I think it really does help that. I gave a lesson to a brand new student yesterday, and he's got some kind of musical understanding because he's been learning the guitar, but never he sort of looked at YouTube and then decided actually he'd like to learn the drums. So
Right.
I went along to give him some lessons. And we talked about various things, but I just spent literally like half a minute just saying, look, we're going to talk about this, and this is the reason we're doing it, and then you can kind of do this. And
Nice.
it wasn't anything particularly flashy. It was just kind of a little bit of drumming. But of course,
Yeah.
you could just see the spark goes and their faces light up and they start to
Totally.
smile. And it's like, then you've got them, and then almost anything's possible, isn't it? And that's really key.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, kind of saying things like, oh, this will benefit you in this way, and UCAS points and that kind of thing. And it's like, nah, if you show them what it is they're aiming for in terms of just good sounding and looking music, then that's going to be the thing that sparks them off.
Yeah. And so your experience as being a classroom teacher as well, did that have any influence on how you structured how the beat goes on, or did it show you how you didn't want to do it? Or
bit of both. It was I'm not afraid to say it was the two most stressful years of my life. It was hard work, no doubt about it. I mean, it was a bit of a kind of an unusual situation. I was doing it part time. I was only there kind of 2 days a week, actually. So I was there Mondays and Tuesdays. But it basically meant that I only saw the kids I was teaching in those kind of 50-ish minute lessons. And there wasn't really any opportunity to, for example, kind of meet up with kids at break times or any other times to kind of develop more in-depth one-on-one relationships. And so I'd kind of, have Mondays and Tuesdays and say, yeah, see you next week. And kind of, so the whole kind of, I wasn't really able to kind of develop any momentum. And at the same time as that, I was also trying to build up the workshops for the rest of the week, which, so it was quite an unusual situation. I kind of feel that as a music teacher, especially with all the extracurricular stuff that's kind of involved with that, really you need to be there all the time. And it is those kind of moments where you can kind of have a chat with kind of one or two of them separately, kind of in a break time or after school, whenever, and that can then feed back into the lessons. Often, I mean, I had some great music teachers as a student, but I really remember the extracurricular stuff the best, far more so than the lessons. And I'm sure I can remember enjoying the lessons, but in terms of the stuff that sticks in your head long term, it was, for example, the kind of projects we did in year 9 with London Sinfonietta based on Steve Reich, and we got to see him performing clapping music. And then I still remember that now, and that was that wasn't a lesson. That was that kind of that stuff that everyone remembers. So my teaching experience, it was a tough time, but I do now structure workshops very differently. I learned a lot about pacing and kind of not. I think just thinking quite kind of simplistically, what will the kids be able to do at the end of the session that they couldn't do before the session? And making sure kind of that box is very, very clearly ticked. And also the kind of differentiation, kind of planning the same kind of end outcome, but with a lot of different routes to achieve that outcome, depending on individuals' own experiences. So yes, in short, rambly answer, but yes, hugely kind of beneficial, but for positive and negative reasons.
Yeah. So give us a little bit of an understanding about the type of range of the workshops that you deliver then. So is it literally from early years all the way obviously through primary, which people listening will be really interested in, but then into secondary, and I guess it then goes sort of into corporate and that sort of thing as well, because like you say,
very much so, yeah,
everyone can be involved, can't they?
Yes, I mean that's kind of, as I'm sure you agree, what I love about percussion is that you hit it, it makes a sound, and obviously it takes months and years and a lifetime to master, but it's that initial accessibility, and that kind of, especially when there's a whole group of you, kind of you do one sound, so, and there's no kind of technique to master before you can get that initial sound. So yeah, we do early years through to kind of keep up all the key stages, and indeed colleges and sixth forms and universities, and teacher training. We have kind of an early years specialist, particularly a woman called Lily May, who's ace, and but then we also kind of employ various other specialists who may either be kind of better geographically suited to where the workshop's going to take place, or indeed have other specialities that we can kind of call upon so they can deliver stuff for us.
Fantastic. So it really is, I guess, a whole countrywide opportunity. So anyone listening from anywhere in the UK can actually get in contact and actually see if a workshop's possible.
Absolutely, and indeed internationally.
Fantastic.
We do indeed travel the world. I was lucky enough to be asked to deliver a keynote speech at the Latin American Heads Conference in São Paulo last April, which was nuts. In fact, the first evening, just before kind of the morning of my keynote, the guy came up to me and I didn't even know his name. We hadn't even introduced his names yet, and he said, "You're the luckiest. You're the bravest man I know." And I said, "Right, why?" He said, "You've come to Brazil to teach samba," and I was like, "Well, there's a bit more to it than that. It's not just that." And I'm aware I'm in São Paulo, so I wasn't purely there to teach samba, but I was doing body percussion and various other things. And I'd been asked to the theme of the conference was creativity. So I'd been asked to kind of practically and verbally describe my take on creativity. Right. But rather than giving that long rambly answer, I just rather cockily just said, yes, what of it? And although I'm nowhere near that cocky, he quite kind of, it was a jokey kind of comment from him anyway. So we were able to kind of talk about it. But we're able to kind of pretty much go anywhere currently, which is lovely.
Oh, that's fantastic, especially as the audience of Education on Fire is, I think it's now in about 30 countries around the world, and it's literally is as far abroad as New Zealand. And there's been Japan and Yemen and quite a lot of people in the States. So who knows? You may get a phone call from absolutely anywhere. You can organise your next little tour as a little world tour.
I look forward to it.
The beat goes on.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So for any teachers that are interested in having a workshop, let's take a typical primary school. How would the day be structured? How would it be? And I also know that you do sort of a one-off session as well as an ongoing relationship with the school. So explain how that works for us.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, often with schools, it's kind of a balance of whether they want kind of more in-depth experiences for like one or two classes, or if they want every child in the school to have a bit of an experience. We often do kind of whole school assemblies. On body percussion. So obviously there's, again, another great thing about body percussion is there's nothing to set up. Conference organisers often like me because they'll think, oh, drumming workshop, how many hours do you need to load in? And I'll go, couple of minutes. And they're like, oh, right, because you are I'm the instrument. Yeah, okay, great. So, body percussion is, I think, very easy to organise. So we'll often start with the whole school thing, and then we'll work with whichever kind of key stages or whichever classes the teacher who's booked wants to focus on. We can do purely kind of body percussion side of things, and in terms of kind of composition skills and performance skills and little rhythmic warm-ups. We also tie it in with literacy, quite kind of key way. At a conference, I met a guy called Pi Corbett, who's kind of within primary circles. I think literacy people will very much know of him, and Talk for Writing, which is the organisation and the kind of literacy ethos that he represents. We've done some work together developing a kind of creative kinesthetic approach to literacy, whereby we either take the set works that or set text that kids are looking at, or their own written work, and then we look at the kind of rhythm and pulse and emotional content of those words, and we kind of discuss how they could be kind of spoken out loud. And there isn't any one way, it's how the child decides it sounds best. And then we take the rhythms that we've kind of then decided upon in terms of spoken words, and we take those rhythms and put them onto body percussion. So it becomes a kind of, as I said, a kind of creative kinesthetic approach, which develops literacy and musical skills simultaneously. And it's not just reading and writing. There's kind of a whole other approach to it. So we can go down that route as well. Other things we've done, particularly primary, initially with BBC 10 Pieces, which some of you may or may not be aware of, but it's this brilliant program set up by the BBC, initially to get primary kids into engage with classical music, and they did these brilliant recordings of 10 very cinematic, engaging, famous pieces of music, one of which also was a commission by a composer called Anna Meredith, who's awesome, and her commission was a body percussion piece called Connect It. and we devised a workshop based on Connect It, not so much teaching the material itself, because she did videos to show how to kind of learn her moves and her rhythms, but more the ideas she'd incorporated, like canons and kind of the movements alongside rhythms and stuff. And so, yeah, we did a workshop based on that, and also kind of incorporating kids' own ideas for body percussion. And then since then, 10 Pieces 2 came out, which was a whole other set of 10 famous pieces, including Mambo from West Side Story. So we did another kind of a body percussion and Latin percussion workshop based on that. And then just recently, 10 Pieces 3 has been launched with a whole other set. So and I get the idea with these is not just to sit and watch them, but very much to respond to them creatively. So kids from all over the country have done not just musical and dance responses, but visual art responses as well. I think video responses, and they've had 10 Pieces proms as part of the prom series at the Albert Hall, featuring some of the kind of the highlights of the responses. So that whole thing's been great, and it's been great for us to kind of we've been a 10 Pieces champion, meaning we've been kind of assisting with the support for those resources as well. So so from a primary point of view, we can focus in all and any of that, body percussion, and of course samba drumming, which we do lots of as well. And these can be one-off taster days, or we also do kind of 10-week-long, more in-depth things that culminate in kind of usually a high-profile concert. We did one with Arts First in Islington, and that culminated with a performance at the Barbican as part of one of their concerts. So it's nice things that we kind of get to be involved with things like that.
I think what my biggest feeling of that is that very often we hear these things like 10 Pieces, and we hear, we can do a samba project and that sort of thing, but you're never quite sure how you get from that initial thought to how it's going to look in your classroom.
No, sure.
And so what I loved about how you described that was the fact that, you could see all those pieces put together, and actually by getting someone like you in, they can actually say, I understand how we get this kind of movement, or talking about that, you said, the literacy and how that can develop into a piece of music, and just joining all those dots up, which I think once you open the door to those sorts of ideas, the workshops, when they're obviously given by a facilitator who's really experienced in that, are fantastic, but it just gives them a way of working beyond that as well. And so from that point of view, it's great value for money, isn't it, whenever you go in and do a workshop, because what you leave behind and the support is invaluable, I think.
Absolutely. And also it's not necessarily really anything that's completely new. Lots of it is actually kind of building on the confidence of not only the pupils, but also the teachers who are then going to be carrying on the work after you've gone. I sometimes have to get a little bit kind of mock cross when I'm doing CPD workshops with teachers who, particularly with the body percussion, will be like, "Oh, don't pick me, I've got no rhythm." Particularly when I'm working with kind of often in primary, when there's teachers who, because they played piano once when they were 10, then they therefore become the music coordinator for the school. And understandably, there's a kind of a confidence element to work with. But I think if kids hear you, jokingly or otherwise, kind of consistently kind of go, "Oh, I can't do this. Oh, no, I'm just going to," kind of not actually taking it seriously, and also not giving themselves the credit that actually you can do this. It is just rhythm. It's not some mystical thing that you can either do or you can't do. And so, yes, I often have to get a little bit more cross, going, stop being self-deprecating, basically. Kind of, if you try and trick yourself into thinking you can do it, you might actually be able to do it. And also with rhythms is that there are often simpler and more advanced ways of doing, kind of playing each rhythm or each approach. And sometimes I think when you're doing workshops with kids who are kind of perhaps more experienced, the teacher doesn't necessarily need to be able to play the rhythm themselves for the kids to be able to do it. They don't feel that that's going to be a hindrance. Just be the facilitator to suggest, rather than doing this rhythm, try double speeding it, or try adding your own kind of interpretation onto that rhythm and seeing what the kids come up with themselves. So be the facilitator rather than, if I can't play it, I can't possibly teach it. I think that I don't think that's true. So yeah.
I mean, certainly in my experience of delivering samba workshops, it definitely is that as a teacher, when you're involved, the children absolutely love it because they see you in a different light, because you are
Yeah.
slightly not in the same state that you are when you're just delivering other parts of the curriculum.
Yes.
And there's also that real sense of we're in it together. We're learning together, especially if there's someone like you there taking the workshop. You know, they're part of the class all of a sudden.
Very much so.
And I think that dynamic change is a really positive one.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, as I think I'd probably speak on behalf of quite a few workshop facilitators, please asking teachers, please get involved. I think often, understandably, teachers' workloads are ridiculous, and it's understandable when teachers might use that time as when a visiting facilitator is coming in to kind of catch up on marking. I'd suggest, if at all possible, try and be involved in the workshop if you can, because as you said, it is hopefully good fun, and also the kids will really respond to you, not like making mistakes, and that's fine, but being part of that learning process with them. I think that all too many times there's teachers who, from one way to another, will just kind of sit in the back, and it's I kind of feel like, you know, you're missing out, and you know, and I'd like to kind of make it as a collaborative thing as possible. I try and get teachers involved in that process, and they're like, well, I'm not going to be able to do it. I think, well, you won't if you're sitting there marking. So yeah, you know, it's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, I completely endorse that as an idea myself, certainly from my experience, and just sort of following on from what you said there is the fact that, you know, your class of students that may be age 9 or age 10, who we're expecting to be able to pick this up because it's a workshop designed for that age group. As a teacher, and as an adult, more importantly, you ought to be able to do it as well, because if we're expecting the younger children to do it,
absolutely,
less developmental coordination possibly, as an adult, you should be able to pick it up. We're not trying to sort of do anything, like you say, we're not taking you to Rio to do, carnival properly, kind of thing.
No, we're not trying to trick you. We're not trying to catch you out. The more we can be involved in the whole thing, and actually, I mean, sometimes also from somebody who works, if you're doing kind of a whole day, particularly with Key Stage 1, having the whole kind of dynamic running alongside, working kind of with the CPD angle alongside it, it's quite nice for the facilitator to be able to kind of have an ongoing kind of commentary with a teacher while the workshop's going on. Oh, you know, you could try this, in for the future, and kind of be delivering some CPD alongside the workshop you're delivering to the kids. So yes, get involved, teachers, please. It's good
really
fun.
sounds fantastic, and I love that kind of thing. Like you say, just that legacy of leaving these things, and it's just tips, isn't it? That just can really help them as they're
I mean, the one thing I always try to make sure that I never leave a school with them going, okay, that was fun, but what now? What I'm trying to kind of constantly create dialogue, and that's where social media has come in really, really usefully, because you can. We did a blog that just kind of came out for kind of via an independent school network yesterday, and already people are kind of responding to it and kind of getting dialogue going, and also sharing their own tips and experience and that kind of thing. So I'm aware that I'm by no means the only person who has experience and skills to add to this. So the more collaborative it can be, the better.
I think that's really important, and I have to say the blog on your website is fantastic in terms of there's lots of great content there, and in my season 1 I had a conversation with Kelly Long, and part of that was kind of how podcasts and social media and the whole community of being a teacher now is just so fantastically online. Your resources aren't just your 4 walls of your school, it's above and beyond
absolutely.
all of that, and that continual conversation I think is just fantastic.
Yeah, and that's I'll often kind of ask people, CPD, who is actively using social media, and I mean, I realise there's a lot of rubbish out there, but actually if you can find the good stuff. I mean, we've been lucky enough to have some very, very experienced kind of classroom teachers do guest blogs for us as well. People like Jane Werry and Steve Jackman from Musical Futures and various other people. So there are some incredible free also resources out there that you can kind of then respond to. So if you're not already using, I mean, I think some people think, oh, kind of Twitter, can be a bit of a minefield, and there is lots of rubbish out there. But if you find the good stuff, it's really, really worthwhile.
Yeah, it really is. And the other thing I sort of find from a workshop point of view is as you said, the difficulty of the rhythms and that kind of thing can vary depending on what your objective is, because like you say, if you're going into a school for one day, certainly for me when I'm delivering mine, it's that kind of, I want them to feel like they're musicians. I want them to feel what it's like to be in an ensemble. I want them to feel what it's like to do a performance. And so therefore sometimes just taking the difficulty down a fraction so that you can get a fantastic final result as a starting point is brilliant. Whereas, like you say, over a 10-week project, we're building up step by step, we're increasing difficulty, we're making it more complex, getting the children involved in lots of different ways. And so it does make a difference, doesn't it, the type of program that you're trying to enter into.
Absolutely. And obviously you're responding to kind of the needs, and also kind of what the kids bring all the time. I mean, obviously very much again from a musical futures approach, responding to kind of the musical experiences and tastes of the people you're working with. I often kind of do a bit of a kind of shout who's playing what, or dancing what, or singing what at the moment. And trying as much as possible to kind of base it on that. There's a kind of a chesty kind of body percussion-y thing, which the words of which essentially go boom, snap, clap, ba-boom, snap, clap, slap, boom, snap, clap, ba-boom, slap, shh. And whenever I ask kids to do their own kind of improvisations, lots of them come up with that. And I'm still to this day trying to find out who wrote it. Those of you who heard those words, if you recognise it, you'll recognise it from those words. But it's great because I'll say, well, I know for a fact that that's not your idea, but you know it and you like it. So see if you can then adapt it to add your own kind of twist on that pattern. And they go, oh, okay, cool. So they're not just, straight cover version, but it's doing their own thing with it. But it's great that there's obviously this I have no idea who wrote it. I think Miley Cyrus has done a version of it, but I think it's her, as it were. So if anybody knows, let us know.
Fantastic. And do get in touch. You can go to educationonfire.com, leave us a message under the podcast and let us know if any of that's
great,
if it's familiar to anybody. And also I should just mention at this point as well that all of the things that we've talked about, whether it's talking about the Rio Carnival or Stomp or Pike Orbit, we're going to have links to all of these things on the website show notes, so
great,
the podcast show notes, so that you can just go there and just check it out and find out all these things that we've sort of mentioned and find out more in-depth information about them. And I hope that's a really sort of helpful resource as well. And
splendid.
Could be of good value to everyone. And
absolutely.
I believe you also got some free downloads on your website as well. Can you give us a bit of information about that?
Yeah. So as well as the blogs, we've got various samba rhythm grids. We've got a kind of a guide to setting up a junk percussion group. In terms of the I guess there's a bit of a health and safety thing with junk percussion, because obviously instruments are made because they don't tend to fall apart as much. But using glass bottles, however, I mean, I say it's not necessarily a question of don't doing it, but knowing kind of best ways around it, that kind of thing. So there's junk percussion guide, rhythm grids. There's various videos actually of us doing kind of various body percussion things. I did a kind of a body percussion taster on the Let's Go Club for CBBS a year or so ago, and kind of people saw that and have responded to that quite well. And also we've kind of done similar things that we did Name That Nursery Rhyme, but as a body percussion thing. So we did kind of the rhythm of a nursery rhyme, and then people had to kind of guess what it was and indeed create their own and get, kind of, again, we're just trying to kind of create a little bit of dialogue, whether it be tips or indeed creating new resources, that kind of thing. But yeah, these are all available via the website.
Fantastic. So for those people listening who just think, right, I need to get this person in to do a workshop or get the beat goes on, what's their best thing to do? Is it just to go to the website and get in contact, and then they can find out prices and how the details work from there?
Either via the website or the email's info@beatgoeson.co.uk, but you'll see via the website kind of what's available for free. So yeah, and it'd be lovely to hear from you, whether or not it's for workshops or just to say hi.
Fantastic. Well, Ollie, thanks so much for being on the show. I love
Absolute pleasure.
I love your enthusiasm, and I know the fantastic benefits these things have for children. Like I said, having done these sorts of things myself, and I'm really pleased. One, that there are people like you out there doing it, and also that it's available across the country and internationally, as you said, because a lot of people I know who teach in London, they have access to so many different things, but people who are further afield from some of the main cities find it difficult to get access to these things sometimes. And so having an organisation that will travel, I think, is a really important thing for them.
Thanks. Yeah, no, absolutely. And but what I quite like about samba is that how it's kind of morphed going around the world. It seems to be in almost every little village that you come across, they've got a samba band going, and it's kind of emphasising that accessibility, not only in terms of musical experience but also in terms of age. So it seems to have just spanned the world, and then also taken on the local musical cultures of it as well. So, for example, I used to play in a band in Brighton called Carnival Collective, which is a kind of a samba drum and bass type thing. Wherever it goes, it seems to kind of soak up the local culture as well.
Yeah, brilliant, lovely. Well,
great stuff.
As I said, thanks so much for your time, and I really
absolute pleasure.
Appreciate the fantastic information and the skills that you've given us today. And I hope to see you in a workshop myself one day soon.
Great stuff. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.